This training video is to teach you how to determine the customer's return rate. First of all, let's go look at the return rate by going to a customer. Select the customer that we want and open the customer card. Once in the customer card, look for statistics in the ribbon or click F7. The statistics for the customer will show us in a return rate section the total sales for the year, the total amount that we have credited to the customer where the return rate applies, and the total amount that have been warranted to the customer. Navision then takes the math by adding these values that have been credited to the customer and dividing them by the sales to come up with a return rate, in this case 0.72. This return rate will be used in the future to determine how fluid you can be with the customer when there is a return request. We do understand there are times when returns happen, and therefore if the customer's return rate is less than OMIC's average, or the number we establish, then we want our team to be very fluid with the customer and help them, no questions asked, with their returns. However, in the event that the return rate is higher than the standard we set, that would indicate that the customer has a fluid return policy with their consumers, a return policy between our customer and the consumer that doesn't fit the OMIC standard, and that's okay for our customer to have that, but at the same time OMIC cannot be liable for it. In those cases, we will need to ask more questions and require returns to be freight prepaid back as well as restock fees more often, and be a little more rigid with the requirements when the customer's program causes a higher return rate than what is expected. This return rate is determined by a return rate field on the lines, so let's go look at that. I go back to my main menu and we'll start by looking at a sales return. Sales return orders and open one. Once inside of a sales return order, go to the lines of the order. On the line, you'll find a column called RGA customer number. And at the end of the line, you'll find a field called return rate. For every line where the RGA customer number is present and the return rate field is yes or checked, the value of that line will count against that customer's return rate. In any instance where the return rate is not checked, the value of the line will not count against the customer's return rate. So if it's an OMIC error, such as we've shipped the wrong part or maybe forgot a part in a kit and we're shipping a replacement, in those cases we would not check the return rate because it's an OMIC error. But in all other cases, the return rate should be checked because those return rates do need to count against the customer's return rate field. Now let's exit this, go to the menu, and let's look at a sales credit memo. When I open a credit memo and I go to the lines, I'll notice the same fields, RGA customer number, and a field called return rate. And again, if the field is checked, it will count the value of this line against that customer's return rate. I'm going to go back to the main menu and look up warranty orders. And in a warranty order, when I go to the lines, I will find the return rate field on those lines as well. Same applies here. If it's checked, the value of that line applies to the customer's return rate. If it is not checked, the value of that line does not apply to the customer's return rate. You should use return rate when it's an item-related transaction, but do not use the return rate when it is something like a marketing co-op, a quick pay, or some other type of credit that is not related to an item. In those cases, do not click return rate. Now let's talk about how to edit it. Let's say we've posted the document, the invoice, or the credit, and we learn that the issue was actually an OMIC mistake and it was not the customer's mistake. We want to remove that return rate. Or vice versa, we didn't charge the return rate against the customer and we later find out that it is supposed to be charged. On the main menu, search for posted sales invoice, find the appropriate invoice, go to the lines, and find the return rate field. And here, for this particular invoice, you can check or uncheck this value to have this apply towards the return rate or not apply towards the return rate of the particular customer. The other area is in the posted sales credit. So I search for posted sales credit memo, go to the list, open up the appropriate credit memo, and in the lines, find the line where the return rate is not appropriately flagged, and then you can flag it there. And that's how you'll update the return rate after the item has been posted. Also note that this applies to all item activity if it's an item line or a resource line. In the cases of a field destroy, we might use a resource line because we don't have the product coming back, and that resource line should be checked with the return rate. So basically, return rate should be checked almost always when it's related to an item activity.